Your support matters. With 90% of our viewers yet to subscribe, we need your help to keep creating engaging content. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below. In the quaint town of Maplewood, life moved at a comfortable pace. The small, tree-lined streets were dotted with charming houses, each with its own story. Among them was the home of Julia and Mark Thompson. They had been married for 7 years, a duration that felt both fleeting and eternal. Their lives had settled into a predictable routine, one that had started to feel stifling to Julia. Julia had always been the kind of woman who thrived on excitement. She had dreams of traveling the world, experiencing new cultures, and living life to the fullest. But with the responsibilities of a home, a job, and a husband, those dreams had taken a back seat. Mark, a dedicated IT professional, worked long hours at his corporate job, often bringing work home. He was dependable and loving. But as the years passed, Julia felt a growing distance between them, a void that she struggled to fill. Every day seemed the same. Julia would wake up early, prepare breakfast, and pack Mark's lunch. She would kiss him goodbye, watching him leave for work with a sense of longing. Once he was gone, the house felt empty. She would spend her days working at a local bakery, a job she enjoyed, but it didn't ignite the passion she once had. One rainy afternoon, Julia was closing up the bakery when she heard the familiar sound of the delivery bell. It was Ben, the new delivery boy who had recently started working for the local grocery store. He was young, with an infectious smile and a boyish charm that instantly brightened the dreary day. "Hey, Julia, got your order?" he said, drenched from the rain, but beaming nonetheless. He handed her a package containing various supplies for the bakery. "Thanks, Ben. You're a lifesaver," Julia replied, her heart fluttering slightly. As they chatted while unloading the boxes, Julia felt a spark of connection. Ben was easy to talk to, and he listened intently as she spoke about her day. He made her laugh, and for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. "Do you ever get bored just delivering groceries?" Julia asked, tilting her head curiously. "Sometimes," Ben admitted, scratching the back of his head. "But I like meeting new people. Plus, it keeps me on my toes." Julia admired his carefree attitude. As he talked about his dreams of becoming a photographer, she felt a pang of envy mixed with admiration. Here was a young man with aspirations, unburdened by the weight of adult responsibilities. As the rain poured outside, they found themselves standing close, the atmosphere charged with an unspoken tension. Julia glanced at the clock and realized she should get back to work, but a part of her didn't want the moment to end. "Wanna grab coffee sometime?" Ben blurted out suddenly, his cheeks flushing a deep shade of red. Julia hesitated, the thought of meeting someone outside of her marriage sending a thrill down her spine. "Sure, why not?" she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. The days passed, and Julia found herself looking forward to her coffee date with Ben. It felt exhilarating to step outside the confines of her life, even if just for a moment. She felt a pang of guilt, of course. Mark was a good husband, and she loved him. But there was a part of her that craved something different, something more. On the day of their meeting, Julia dressed carefully, choosing a flowy dress that made her feel youthful and vibrant. As she walked into the cafe, she spotted Ben at a corner table. He waved excitedly, and Julia felt her heart race. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, as if they had known each other for a lifetime. Ben was insightful and had a unique perspective on life that captivated Julia. They shared stories, dreams, and laughter, and with each moment, Julia felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows, Julia felt a thrill of excitement that she hadn't experienced in years. It was intoxicating, and she couldn't help but lean closer to Ben as he spoke. "Can I be honest with you?" Ben asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Of course," Julia replied, her pulse quickening. "I feel like there's something special between us. I know we just met, but I really enjoy spending time with you." Julia's heart raced at his words. She had never considered how far this could go. The thrill of the unknown was both exhilarating and terrifying. She thought of Mark, who would be waiting at home for her, completely unaware of the emotional whirlwind she was experiencing. "Ben, I I'm married," Julia said, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. "I know," he replied softly, his eyes searching hers. "But does that mean you can't have a little fun? Just for a moment?" Julia felt a rush of conflicting emotions. She loved Mark, but she also yearned for the excitement and passion that had faded from her life. The thought of breaking free, even for a moment, was intoxicating. As the evening wore on, they exchanged numbers, and Julia found herself smiling at the prospect of their next meeting. She knew it was a slippery slope, but for the first time in years, she felt alive. In the following weeks, Julia and Ben met frequently, sharing coffee, laughter, and increasingly intimate moments. Each encounter pulled her deeper into a world of exhilaration and desire. Julia felt like a different person, shedding the weight of her mundane life with every stolen moment. But as the thrill of the affair grew, so did the guilt. She would come home to Mark, who welcomed her with open arms and an affectionate smile. The contrast between their mundane routine and the excitement she shared with Ben grew sharper. One evening, as Mark wrapped his arms around her, Julia felt a pang of sadness. She loved him, yet she was betraying the very foundation of their marriage. The more time she spent with Ben, the more she felt like she was living a double life, and the fear of discovery loomed over her like a dark cloud. As the weeks turned into months, Julia found herself caught in a web of conflicting emotions. The thrill of her secret rendezvous with Ben was intoxicating, yet guilt gnawed at her conscience. Every time she returned home to Mark, her heart felt heavy, burdened by the weight of her betrayal. She was living a lie, and the exhilaration that once filled her felt tainted with the fear of being discovered. Ben, with his youthful exuberance, had become a beacon of excitement in Julia's life. They shared stolen kisses and whispered secrets in the shadows, each moment intensifying their connection. Yet, deep down, Julia knew that this affair was unsustainable. The thrill of their encounters was overshadowed by the growing realization that she was risking everything she had built with Mark. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Julia's mind wandered back to her life before Ben, before the excitement and the lies. Mark entered the kitchen, his tired eyes lighting up as he caught a glimpse of her. "Hey, love, what's for dinner?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Just the usual," Julia replied, her voice betraying her inner turmoil. Mark noticed the tension in her tone. "You okay? You seem a little distant lately," he said, concern etching his features. "I'm fine," Julia insisted, forcing a smile. Yet the truth was far from that. The facade was becoming harder to maintain, and the guilt was festering into something unbearable. One fateful afternoon, Julia received a message from Ben, asking her to meet him at their usual spot, a secluded park bench where they had shared countless intimate moments. She felt a mix of excitement and dread. As she arrived, she noticed Ben pacing, his expression tense. "Hey, what's wrong?" Julia asked, sensing the shift in his demeanor. I've been thinking a lot about us, Ben said, his voice low. I know this is all a little crazy, but I want more. I can't keep doing this in secret. Julia's heart raced. She had anticipated this moment, yet the weight of his words sent a chill down her spine. Ben, I don't know if I can, she replied, her voice trembling. I'm married. I can't just walk away from that. And what about what we have? Ben pressed, his frustration evident. You can't tell me you don't feel something real here. I do, Julia admitted, tears stinging her eyes. But I can't just leave my life behind. Mark deserves better. Ben's expression hardened. So, you're just going to keep stringing me along, living a double life? It's not fair to either of us. Julia felt cornered, her heart racing. I need time to think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As she walked away from Ben, a sense of dread settled in her stomach. She could feel the walls closing in, and she knew that the secret she had been keeping was about to unravel. That evening, as Julia sat on the couch beside Mark, she felt a deep sense of foreboding. He flipped through channels absent-mindedly, while she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to come crashing down. Just then, her phone buzzed with a message from Ben. We need to talk. This can't go on like this. Her heart sank. She knew that the time for decisions had come. As she glanced at Mark, who laughed at something on TV, she felt a wave of grief wash over her. How had it come to this? How had she let things spiral so out of control? The next day, Julia met Ben again, this time at a small cafe. The tension was palpable as they sat across from each other, the weight of their decisions hanging heavy in the air. I can't keep doing this, Julia said, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't keep betraying my husband. It's not who I am. Ben's expression softened, but his frustration remained. I understand, but I can't just be your secret. I need to know where we stand. I don't know, Julia admitted, her voice breaking. I love Mark, but I'm so confused. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Then make a choice, Ben said, his voice firm yet gentle. You can't have both. You need to decide what you really want. With those words, Julia felt her heart shatter. The reality of her situation hit her like a freight train. She couldn't keep living a lie, nor could she continue to hurt the person she loved. That evening, as Julia returned home, she found Mark waiting for her with a concerned look etched across his face. Hey, where have you been? I was starting to worry. I was just out, Julia replied, her voice shaky. Just out? You've been distant and I can feel it. Something's off, Julia. You can talk to me, Mark urged gently. In that moment, Julia felt her resolve crumble. The weight of her guilt bore down on her like a heavy shroud. Mark, I need to tell you something, she began, her heart racing. As she spoke, the truth poured out in a torrent of emotions. Her feelings for Ben, the thrill of their affair, and the guilt that had consumed her. Mark's expression shifted from concern to shock, and then to heartbreak. Julia, how could you? He whispered, his voice trembling. I trusted you. I thought we had something real. It was a mistake. I didn't want to hurt you, Julia cried, tears streaming down her face. Mark stood up, his hands trembling. You've shattered everything we built. I can't believe you would do this to me. The room felt suffocating as silence enveloped them. Julia felt a profound sense of loss, realizing that the life she had known was slipping through her fingers. She had pushed Mark away with her choices, and now the reality of her actions lay bare before her. In the days that followed, the weight of Julia's betrayal hung heavy in the air. Mark moved out, taking only his essentials, and leaving behind a home filled with memories of laughter and love. Julia felt utterly alone. The excitement she once felt with Ben now felt hollow and empty. She reached out to Ben, but their connection had changed. The thrill of the affair had turned into a stark reminder of her choices. Ben, who had once filled her with joy, now felt like a ghost haunting her. As weeks turned into months, Julia tried to rebuild her life. She focused on work at the bakery, channeling her energy into creating beautiful pastries. Yet every time she saw a couple laughing together, the pang of loneliness cut deep. One evening, as she closed the bakery, she found herself standing outside, staring at the twinkling lights of Maplewood. The town felt different, each street corner a reminder of the life she had lost. She realized that the excitement she had craved had come at a terrible cost. Months later, Julia found herself sitting in a cafe, her heart still heavy, but beginning to heal. She had started attending therapy sessions, grappling with the choices she had made and the pain they had caused. One day, as she sat sipping her coffee, she noticed a familiar figure walking by, Mark. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them faded. "Hey," he said softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Hey," Julia replied, her heart racing. They exchanged small talk, and it felt like a breath of fresh air, familiar, yet foreign. Julia realized that she still loved Mark, and she wanted to make amends. "I'm sorry for everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I made terrible choices. I hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Mark nodded, his expression softening. "I know. It'll take time, but I'm willing to try to understand. I just need to see that you've changed." With time and effort, Julia and Mark began to rebuild their relationship. They took small steps, attending couples therapy and communicating openly about their feelings. Julia was determined to prove that she could be the partner Mark deserved. As they worked through their pain, Julia found solace in her passion for baking, creating new recipes that reflected her growth. She even began hosting small baking classes, inviting people from the community to join her. One day, as she stood in front of her class, she felt a sense of fulfillment. She had learned that life was about choices, and while she had made mistakes, she was committed to making better ones moving forward. Julia and Mark's journey was not without its challenges, but they learned to communicate, trust, and rebuild the love that had once brought them together. They discovered that healing took time and that the road to forgiveness was filled with ups and downs, but they were willing to walk it together. As they stood hand in hand, watching the sunset over Maplewood, Julia knew she had not only found her way back to Mark, but had also rediscovered herself. Life may have thrown her off course, but she was determined to embrace the future with hope and love.